Hello guys and welcome to another video. In today's video I am going to be talking about my DNFs. I feel like lately I've been DNFing a lot of books and definitely in the beginning half of the year, so the past kind of 3 months, I think I had a couple. So I was like, oh yes, I can like do a video, and then in the past like 3 months it has like ramped up a little bit, so I have several for you. Storygraph do this good thing where they have these like stats of you know, how long it took you before you DNF'd a book and all those sorts of things. But keep in mind that this is collating all the books that I've DNF'd. It's not based on just 2024. So it is including like past DNFs, but I thought like it is kind of like fascinating to see. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk in terms of my recent DNFs. I'm going to start with the most recent one. And that is this book, which you can't see the title of because this is a proof copy, but this is the Quiet Tenant. The Quiet Tenant. And yeah, this was an arc through work. I think it was just like a couple of these in the office, and I'm pretty sure this was from like 2023. I hope not 2022. But I ran out of like my fiction books to read over like one weekend. I think it was last weekend. I did have Carla left, but I was like, do you know what? I've got a massive stack of unread books, which looking at them I've realised most of them are actually non-fiction books, which is not too bad. So I decided that I would read this because I think the other one there was like The Good Terrorist by Doris Lessing, and I just feel like I'm not in the frame of mind to like read that right now. I just wanted something like really light and easy to breeze through. So this book, I'm trying to look at the thing because I don't think, well yeah, so it's got a kind of like blurbish here, but it's not really a main blurb. So I got to page 174 of this book before I DNF'd it. And before I DNF'd it, I actually did flick through to the end so that I could see what was going to happen, to see whether it was worth me reading. And then I saw that and I was like, it's not worth me reading because, no. There are, I think, two issues for me in this book. I don't like the writing style. So this book is written from the perspective of a woman who is in the shed. And then she later becomes a woman in the house. And then there are other perspectives from this woman called Emily, who is a cocktail waitress. She actually owns, I guess, the bar or the restaurant. I can't recall which bit she owns. And then the daughter of the man in this book. So we're getting different perspectives. And we start off with the perspective of the woman in the shed. This woman has been kept in this shed, it seems, by this man. We know his name is Aidan. She later does find out what his name is. And I think on average we kind of find out she's been kept there for about 5 years, including he's coming into this shed, he's kidnapped her at one point, and then he's just coming to visit her, you know, trigger warnings for sexual assault. So at the back of the book it says here, he took you, it says you've been his for 5 years, but you've been careful waiting for him to mess up, it has to be now. The thing that very quickly it becomes apparent in the first kind of opening stages of this book is this guy has to move. Now, okay, I'm going to say spoiler alert for if you do want to like read the rest of this book, because the point in which I need to explain why for me this book just became quite ridiculous is this point that I'm about to reveal, which is in he has to move house and he's kept her in the shed for 5 years. So he is obviously having difficulty with what he's going to do with the woman he's kidnapped and kept captive for 5 years. And she manages to negotiate that he should take her with him. And he says yes. What they agree to is so ludicrous to me that I'm just like, I don't know how you kept this woman in your shed for 5 years and didn't get caught, because you dumb. He basically decides that yes, he will keep her. So he's going to move into a new house with his daughter, and he's going to put her in the spare room. And she's just going to live there. She's going to be handcuffed to the radiator. If the daughter asks any questions, she says she works from home, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, excuse me? I think the daughter's like 11 or 12. And I'm like, excuse me? How risky? What a way to get caught. The things that could happen are endless. And I don't even mean in the sense of her escaping. I just mean in the sense of like, I don't know, someone randomly coming to the house or anything like that. I was just like, no. If you know, were a smart kid, you would just kill her. Like at this point, you know, you have to accept you had a good run for 5 years. She gotta go. He doesn't do any of that. So that to me was incredibly baffling. I just don't think that is realistic. I don't think anyone would do that. If he didn't have a kid, yes. But I think the chances of like, what are you gonna do when your daughter starts to grow up and just, you know, maybe she bunks school one day and realizes like this woman is still in the house and then goes into her room and sees she's chained to the radiator. Like, for example, that, you know, he tells her not to go into the woman's room, which, okay, but one day she might do that, and then what are you going to, that's why I was just like, it doesn't make no sense to me, right? The second thing that I didn't like about the book is the way that it's like written. So from the perspective of this woman that we don't know her name, she writes in this really annoying bit like, when the house is dark, he finds you. He scans you from head to toe. I hate that kind of narration. And it is actually fine in, I believe it's Open Water. That works. It was one of the reasons why I think a lot of people didn't really gel the book. It's really annoying in this book because it's meant to create that sense of tension, that sort of build up, you know. It's not doing it. It's actually very, very frustrating. I think it'd be much better if it was written from the perspective of the first person, like, I did this, I feel this, because I actually think as a reader I am not scared because I am not in that situation. So I don't know why you'd put it in the second person. I didn't really get it, and it actually just becomes so annoying, so repetitive, and you're just like, no. So yeah, I got to a point where I was just like, I don't actually really care about like what's happening, because it started involving this other character, Emily, and all this sort of stuff, and she's clearly like in love with Aidan, and it just seemed so obvious, like to me again, what was going to happen, that at some point Emily would obviously get closer to Aidan and probably want to go to his house, and that's where a lot of the complication would arise. Obviously I did flick through to see what happened. I saw it and I was just like, the ending isn't even satisfying. That's the worst bit, you know. I think if we're going to talk in terms of like what the ending was like, I think for this to be really satisfactory, yes, okay, it would be her escaping him, but it also involves finding out like what happens to him, and the book doesn't even do that. For someone who's kept a captive for like that long, he gets arrested and we don't find out anything about like what happens to him. Now there are two ways to look at that. I think a lot of the times when there is violence against women, a lot of the focus is on the man and like, why did he do it, blah 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 blah. I didn't need to know like why he did it and stuff like that. I don't think it goes into that, but I think I needed to at least know, like, I don't know, he was treated badly when he was arrested and the whole town hated it, but you know, there was none of that, and it just felt like, well, why? Especially in this book, he's the stand-up guy, he helps everyone in town, blah 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 blah. I really could have cared less. And I think when it came to the other character, Emily, who was like clearly in love with him and like fawning over him, I was just like, it just feels icky to read, knowing that we know he has a woman captive in his house. So I was like, I'm not about to hear about some woman falling in love with a serial killer. I can't do it, so I DNF'd it. The next book I DNF'd is 12 Words for Moss. I was reading this as part of the Jalak Prize. I actually don't think that there is anything wrong with this book. I think it's, you know, really nice to have a woman of colour writing about nature, and you know, specifically writing about something she's interested in, which in this case is moss. This book is also dealing with grief. Her father has recently passed away, so, and also in some bits she's like kind of I think she's half Kenyan, she must be, I think her mum is Kenyan, and looking at different like words for moss or different kind of weeds and how they're referred to in the language. I think in this case she might be talking about Swahili. I could be misremembering. And it is nice, it is pleasant. It's a mixture of, you know, prose, a mixture of poetry in which she is writing, it's a mixture of poetry, it's a mixture of prose in which she is writing, I guess, about like different types of moss. I think for me it's just a lack of interest in moss. I think this writing is very beautiful, it feels very like, I don't know, fresh, it feels very naturey, it feels lovely, but the interest just isn't there for me. I'm not that connected to, I guess, moss, or like maybe in general I'm just not that connected to nature writing. So I was just like, I feel like I've been making myself go through the paces of reading this book just so like I could try and finish wrapping up that video of the Jalak Prize, and I was like, I don't really need to do that, because I think with DNFing what I've kind of realised is there is no point in me continuing to persevere through a book only in the end to give it 1 or 2 stars. Like, I just feel like for me, for the, like, I guess the author, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to put ourselves in the meat and be like, the book is shit, you know? Whereas if I DNF the book, I can just come to a point where I didn't read the whole thing, so I cannot comment on it as a whole. I can only comment on what I read and know that it's not for me. There are too many, for me it's just as well, there are too many books on my list for me to be like suffering through a book, you know? The way in which I feel when I'm reading a book that I really enjoy, or a book that's not causing me any resistance, is so different to the way that I feel when I'm coming back to a book and thinking I don't really like it. And in the case of this, it was just kind of like whereas in the case of the previous book, it was pissing me off, you know? And those are 2 feelings I get when I'm DNFing, and they're still feelings that I like need to listen to. So this wasn't for me, but I know it will be for like someone else. And there is a nature kind of writing book on the Jalak Prize as well, which I am going to pick up next, which is called A Flat Place. So I'll see how I get along with that. It could just be maybe I don't get along with nature writing, but we'll see. And for reference, I got to page 38 in this. I think it's important to probably note where you kind of DNF things sometimes, just so you know how far into it you went. So there's 175 pages in this, and yeah, I got to page 38. And for A Quiet Place, there are 398 pages, and I think I said I got to like page 174, so nearly like halfway. For the next book I DNF, I actually spoke about this in one of my reading vlogs, so I'm not going to go over it too much in here, but that book was Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I mentioned again in that video that I really wanted to read her newest book, Penance, yeah, and I recall obviously she wrote this and this was like all the rage at the time. I did not like this book. I got to like 63, I read 63% of the book. It was a library copy, a physical copy. And I didn't like anything about the book. Like that's just as far as as much as I'm gonna say, because I said everything in that other video. It's just not the type of book I like. Another book that I DNF'd is The Wren. I think again I might have spoken about this in a reading vlog. If I didn't, I'm gonna just speak about it very lightly here. The Wren is by Enright, and it was longlisted, I believe, for the Women's Prize. And I didn't read the Women's Prize in its entirety, but I just looked at some of the books and was like, oh, what sounds interesting to me? And this sounded interesting. It was about a mother-daughter relationship. I did not like it. The book is written in a very abstract way, and looking at some of the reviews, a lot of people commented on the fact that it's just like that's her writing style, and that also was one of the reasons that I guess they didn't really get on with it, and it just wasn't for me. When I looked at some of the reviews, a lot of people said the same thing as well about just the way it's written, and I think also the way it's blurbed is made to sound like, you know, very much like a mother-daughter relationship, but it is actually looking at the daughter, and it's like when you say mother-daughter relationship, the blurb insinuates it's about kind of the mum and I guess struggling with the fact that her daughter has like moved away. But for a lot of the portion that I read, you follow the daughter and kind of she's like living in Dublin, I think, and kind of her dating life basically, and just dating this one guy and just it being not great. And then we kind of are going back into her kind of lineage through that. So she goes to like some sort of event with this guy, and they're like, oh, you're I think she's the daughter of the poet, or the poet's her granddad. I can't remember which way round it is. So then there's that in there, but I'm sure all the pieces come together in some way, but I read 27% of this book, so if the pieces come together, I would not know. I didn't hate it, but I just found that I wasn't enjoying it, and I found that I didn't really think that what I read on the blurb was what I was reading like content wise, and I thought if it did come to it at some point, I didn't really care. And I think we get the perspective later of her mum a little bit. Again, by then for me it just felt like a little bit too late, and I just think the way it's written and the themes, not even the themes it was dealing with, the way it was approaching the themes, it wasn't for me. So I was like, I'm gonna put the book down. I don't actually need to read this. Another book that I DNF'd, and I got so far into this book, so I'm so surprised that I DNF'd it, but it was annoying me. And that book is The List. Oh man, I read the author's like non-fiction book which she co-authored and loved it. This book, it sounded so good, and I know loads of people read it, loads of people loved it. I have so many like issues with the book, and because I'm going to keep this video short, I'm actually not going to dive into it too much. But I think for me there was just, I felt like it was really like unrealistic. I just felt there were things that the character did that did not make sense to me. So this is about a girl who works at a like, I guess, feminist magazine, and she has been one of the kind of journalists and you know who will comment all the time in cases where, you know, men are found to be like sexual abusers or any kind of scandal, but not in the way that, you know, she's like, you know, just after gossip or stuff like that, but very much truly trying to hold men accountable. She's about to get married to a man named Michael, and this list goes viral on Twitter and it contains a list. It's a list where people can just submit and say, you know, something that happened to them, and her fiance's name is on the list. So obviously she needs to deal with that situation, right? Especially when people are going to hold her to a higher standard because she's a woman that calls out like other men on this, and like also other women that become complicit with it. So the story is partially about that, but then the story is also about her relationship and, you know, the fact that she has, you know, dated around, that she has found her person, yada yada yada. So there are a lot of things to contend with in this book, and then there's also her friendships, and with her friends, you know, she has these two friends, one who's completely like, I can't believe you're even like entertaining him, the other friend that's just like, well, you don't know who put him on the list. And, you know, she basically says to her fiance, like, you need to prove to me that you didn't do this. And I think for me, the thing that I don't get about this is, as a journalist, I'm sure they put her down as an investigative journalist. Why would you not use your journalist skills to find out, like, who put him on the list? Not to chase the person down, but to really find out, like, what happened here. Because for me, what I feel like is she leaves the proving of not doing this in the hands of her partner. And okay, that could be a way to do it. And I don't mean in a way of doing it to be like, if you find out he's wrong or right. But I just feel like for your own peace of mind, but also because you are a journalist, you have the resources available to find out, you know? And I feel like a lot of this book is her just being like really confused and her wallowing, and I was not understanding it, you know? And so loads of things then, you know, end up happening. But I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand like the decisions the character was making. And I think that was the primary thing for me. And then when I read the reviews about it, I'm like, did I read the same book as everyone? I think it got to a point in the book, which I won't ruin because it's a huge part of the plot of moving the story along, where it's just like, I just don't know that I feel we have been told that this character is well known enough for that. So then I just feel like this is just being it's too much. And then I decided to DNF it. And I feel like I've given a very loose explanation of the book, but unlike this book, I don't want to spoil like what happens in it, because I think a lot of people haven't read it or want to read it. But yeah, I was quite sad to not gel with it as much as like everyone else did, and really enjoy it as much as everyone else did, because I feel like it could have tackled so many things, and it's, you know, it's dealing with a really important topic, right? You know, in the whole kind of following the Me Too era, and just, you know, obviously women wanting to hold men accountable. I feel like there was so much you could have gone into in terms of that kind of like feeling of, here is things happening wider and socially, but what does it feel like when it happens to me? Because I think it's so easy to sit there and be like, you should leave him, blah 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 blah. But if we're talking about love, if we're talking about the way that we're fed love and like finding a partner, especially black women and black love, I think there was so much that could have been involved. And yes, it's a fiction book, and yes, she doesn't have to tackle everything, but it felt like she wanted to tackle bits. She wanted to tackle it, and she tackled bits of it, and then there was all this other bit of plot that needed to come together, and I just felt like it didn't come together. So the final book I'm going to speak to you about is Consent, but again, I'm going to touch on it very, very lightly, because I do recall talking about this book and DNFing it in a reading vlog. I got to 69% of the way through the book, and listen, I'm trying to recall, maybe this was also a book that was written in the second person, because that could have accounted for its annoyingness. But this book is so bad, honestly. And the reason why I actually ended up reading this book is because I was looking for that book Consent by Annabelle Lyon, which I did end up reading. I thought it was like actually quite good. But this would pop up and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. No, it's not interesting. For me, this book is like someone let a man write out his wild fantasies and then they published it, and I'm just like, should we be worried? This book is about a woman named Frances who basically attracts the attention of a stalker, and it's clear like he has stalked other people before, and it probably is told from the third perspective if it's told from his perspective, because I was about to say it's told from his perspective and the things he is doing. And yeah, it felt like, I think the problem with this book is it felt like someone imagined what a book or what the narrative in someone's head would sound like if they were stalking someone, and just ran with that in a very like one-dimensional way. So it felt like the way in which you would tell a story like that, and you're just like, okay, but like, if you're going to publish a book, surely you want to put like your own spin on it. So it just felt like, okay, who wrote this? Like, was someone like 15 when they wrote this, like when you're just starting out to write? And then, oh my god, he just starts doing the maddest things, and I was just like, is it really that deep? Anyway, but to be honest, like, I shouldn't say that, because if that's the mindset, then, you know, you will act in ways in which like someone like me cannot fathom. But again, I think it just became too far out for me, and I was just like, I'm gonna stop reading this because this is ridiculous. But yeah, I did speak about it in a reading vlog, and I just like I said, I think it reads like a kind of like 14-year-old boy wrote this, and it's just really bizarre to me. It wasn't enjoyable, and I was like, the more I continue to read this, the more pissed off I get, and I don't want to read this. So those are the books that I've DNF'd so far this year. So it really is like not that many, and I just felt like in the past like, yeah, month and a half, I have DNF'd like 3 books or something, so that felt like a rapid succession, or rapid increase rather, than it did in the first like 3 months, because it was probably like 1 book a month, and then was like, oh, okay. So yeah, but I feel so differently about DNFing than I did in like the past couple of years, right? Because now if I'm not enjoying a book and I feel that resistance, or like I'm actively like hating it, it might take me a day or two, then I'm like, oh yeah, you can put that book down because like you're not enjoying it, and that's why you're having this feeling. I will not suffer through the book. I will not. There are some books, like, you know, in the past where I've been like, and then I continue to read it, and you know, I've enjoyed it. Like, I get a 3 stars, and I think 3 stars is like that. It's like that only point that you're just like, okay, this was worth it. Anything lower, and I'm like, why did I continue to read this? You know. And there are sometimes your books that you will end up giving 2 or 1 stars, but you're not thinking that you're hating it. You're thinking, oh, this is gonna get better at some point, and then it doesn't, and then you're like, okay, oh, the sum of its whole, it is a 2 star. So yeah, that is it from me. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you actually enjoyed them, because I feel like the list is one that everyone enjoyed. So, and I thought I would enjoy it too. I didn't expect to DNF it. But I will catch you in another video. Bye.